We are, you are live, the little sign says. So Joe Harford, founder and president of Reclamere, joined by our really good friend, Michael Nye, who we have known for a really long time. Used to tease him that he was related to the science guy. What's that guy's name? Remember that guy? You know what I'm
Bill.
talking about? Exactly.
Bill Nye.
Bill Nye, the science guy. Although I think Michael Nye, the information security guy, is even cooler as far as I'm concerned. I'm kind of biased. My sister is running late, which is not uncommon for her. And she may not even join at all. So, you may just simply be stuck with me. I had the opportunity to talk with Michael probably about a week ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, at an end of year event that we had down in the Harrisburg area. And then followed up and thought it'd be a really great idea if we talked about kind of end of year stuff, not doom and gloom, but just end of year information security stuff. And it was timely. This morning I'm away. I'm actually in Florida with my wife. We travel the last 2 weeks of every year and work from Florida because I love Florida. And it was funny because we're having coffee this morning, and on her phone she gets pinged with a text message from UPS saying, "Hey, there's a package that's in our warehouse and we can't deliver it to you, but if you click on this link." So it is a friendly reminder that the whole world of information security, text messages, et cetera, and so forth is really kind of creepy. I've got some experiences and some stories I can share with you, both from clients as well as just kind of what we read and what we see, in the string of events. But Michael, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share a little bit about your background, where you've been, kind of the roles that you've played, the stuff that you do, and any kind of, crazy stories you want to share.
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate that. Boy, I've been involved with computers since the 80s, right? Programming back in junior high school, stuff like that. First job after college was basically building data networks down over at Gettysburg College. And I remember back in the early days, the early 90s, at the same time, we're teaching people what the internet is and how to use email and stuff like that. I remember getting called into the boss's office one day. He says, "Yeah, we got this really interesting thing going on with one of our mainframes." I said, "What's going on?" High CPU cycles for one particular application. What it boiled down to was we found people hacking the mainframe using our own technology to try and crack passwords within our enterprise. This is like 1995, 96. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
This is where some of the first worms started showing up, right? These things. In fact, we had one kid who wrote I don't know if you remember the language, HyperCard, but it was an early development platform. And he had, as a high school project, he had written a worm with HyperCard and didn't realize, it's a ha thing with his friends. And before you know it, was invading their school system.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, so this is the kind of stuff in my early days that kind of piqued my interest. It's like, what is this whole security world that we're living in now that's unlike anything? And everything was kind of like the 60s. It was free and open. Everybody loved, data was good. Everybody loved each other. Everything was good. And now all of a sudden we have these threats coming into our environment, right?
Right.
And so, as things evolved and we had to start locking things down more and building segmentation, it became more and more of the ongoing conversation, right? And you think back to those days and think, gosh, how simple things really were back in those days compared to how we see them now in the real world. Because it's like, just now I have to worry about not only myself and my family, my mom and dad, friends, family, everybody's like, hitting me up saying, "Hey, Mike, what do you think about this email?" Right? Or I got the text from UPS too. Should I click on this link for my package? Because 'tis the season, right? We're all expecting things to be showing up, and Lord knows we don't want to miss anything, right? The old FOMO, right? Fear of missing out thing is now part of our culture as well. So yeah, it's at a time, it's an interesting time to be part of this world. I was about 15 years ago, I was looking around for, hey, what's my next adventure in life going to look like? I was working at Penn State Health at the time as a network engineer, doing a lot of security work with VPNs and networks, and load balancers, the whole 9 yards, right? But I really wanted to start exploring the world of security much more deeply. So, put on my trusty Penn State hat, went to their world campus for a couple of years, got my grad studies done in homeland security and cybersecurity and data forensics, all that kind of stuff. And boy, it took everything that I had been doing for so many years in the world of IT and just took it up to a whole nother level. So
Sure.
I'm a huge proponent of people going back and getting advanced degrees if it's within their ability to do that. And Penn State puts together a heck of a program. So shout out to them. So, but having said all that, now for the last 6 years, I've been working at UPMC. First, I was in charge of basically their central PA region, 7 hospitals in that area. And remember walking in day one to that, and our Terry Freed, our vice president at the time, he said, "Go forth and do good things from a security perspective."
Right.
And so I had my marching orders, and that's exactly what I started doing. Sat down with the different technical teams, engineering teams, and folks, and started assessing where we really were as an organization. Had some great conversations. It was a great sort of a team building exercise where me as the new security guy and they as the engineering guys could have some good conversations about, here's some of the gaps and challenges that we recognize that we have. We just need somebody to help focus our energies into spending more time and locking those systems down, decommissioning those systems, and doing the bread and butter, the sort of grunge work of getting us into a better security posture. I've always espoused the notion that security is highly aspirational, right? I mean, you'll never get complete security unless you unplug everything from
Sure.
the wall, and
Sure.
then the hackers have effectively won. You can't go there. So what do? You leverage what you do know. You know your internal systems hopefully better than the hackers do, and so it's about building awareness, transparency into those systems, understanding where your risks, vulnerabilities are, and then getting those people who have the expertise to really hone in on those areas and spend some time, because we all know keeping the lights on is a full-time challenge for any IT group.
Mm-hmm.
But getting the security people to the folks to get security minded and really focus on very specific things, I think made significant progress for us in the 5 or 6 years that I was working there in the CPA region.
So I think one of the things I hear is a lot of experience, a lot of really great experience, IT operations, as well as a desire to grow into security, coupling that with education, and now being an InfoSec practitioner for a large healthcare system. The other thing that I'm not hearing, although I believe, is that resources such as yourself are very, very thin.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole world of the gap in what we need as compared to what is available, meaning those new InfoSec practitioners coming into the space, we can't keep up with that demand.
Right.
The other thing is we were talking about just a couple of days ago, Reclamere ran in October, a Cybersecurity Awareness Month contest, for lack of a better term. Long story short, we wound up donating $1,000 to the South Hills Cyber Club for students. And, we're talking about, how did we get here? And the reality is that there are so many resources available to the bad guys, as we would label them, because the incentive is to make money, compared to the resources that are available to the good guys aren't necessarily the same, obviously. I think the other challenge is just simply the amount of work that has to be done to protect the environment compared to the amount of work that has to be done to get into the environment. Because the people that are trying to get in are leveraging things like, oh my gosh, click on this text message because your package can't get to Aunt Sally, kind of thing, right? That emotional element. One of the things that I came across this has been the first time this year that I had this happen to me about 6 months ago with a client. Their entire IT group was aging out within a 9-month period of time. Director, sysadmin, and one other position. And the person taking over, that literally was the COO of the organization, had no experience with IT, came to us as a referral. And basically, we've been working with them to help them build out their new team. And although they've been able to find people that fill the sysadmin role, the IT manager, director, et cetera, these are also people that are very young practitioners that don't have 10, 15, 20 years of experience. So that was one of the challenges, from an end of year perspective, that I think about, like, oh my gosh, like this staffing thing this is a big deal. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think, what are organizations going to do rolling into 25 that, they struggle with this whole staffing thing? Like, what are they going to do, Michael?
So I remember a number of years ago sitting on an airplane, and for some divine intervention, whatever reason, somebody had left a textbook in the pocket of the seat ahead of me. And I just pulled it out. I'm on a flight. I'm like, wonder what this is, right? It was an economics textbook, like a 101 economics thing. And I had never really taken an economics, class. So I was like, I'm going to be reading this a little bit. So I read like the first chapter just to get a sense of what the study of economics really talks about. And what I walked away in a nutshell is this: economics is the study of how, when you have more demands than you have resources to solve all of the problems that a business is dealing with, is challenged with, how do you most effectively use those limited resources to solve as many of those problems as you possibly can in the best way, right? And when I started thinking about that, mapping that to cybersecurity, is like, oh, we've got X number of threats that are constantly adapting, coming at us, and we only have X finite resources to deal with them. So really, cybersecurity management is really about marrying the principles of economics, like understanding where our greatest needs are, our biggest gaps and risks are, with the limited resources. And then really all you have on your side is two things: time and home field advantage. You know your environment better than hopefully the hackers do. If they know more about your environment than you do, you've got much bigger problems, right? So if you do that, and understanding that many times hackers, we do pen tests as well, right? And the one thing that our pen testers are constantly doing is keeping in touch with our SOC, our Security Operations Center, because they know a little bit about the landscape, but they're doing testing in ways that could trip a trigger, right? Could send a red flag. And so we have to have this partnership. So as our pen testers do, because we all know one thing: a pen tester is, unless they really understand the environment, they're going to trip something up. And you want to make sure that somebody's there watching this and keeping on tabs on things. So point being, hackers know they have limited time to get inside and work within an organization before likely something's going to happen. So it's got to be almost a quick strike. Sometimes they can lay dormant for periods of time, because there's that approach too. But most times they're trying to get in, figure out if there's anything worth hanging out for, and then, if possible, exfiltrate that data. So, understand the conditions of sort of the world we're living in, the realities of the world. And so again, try to maximize the use of limited resources to affect change in terms of, return on investment, so to speak.
Sure.
So that's the thing. And the other thing, of course, the golden rule, assume breach, right? So it's going to happen. Do we have adequate layers of segmentation, security controls in place? If you've got that's still that one system that's run on XP or systems Windows 7 for some reason, if we can't upgrade it and can't get rid of it, are we putting adequate measures around it? Do we have moats and drawbridges and all that stuff that are next to zero cost, right? But still provide effective controls for us in an efficient manner?
Yeah, I think that the whole idea of knowing the landscape and being able to plan for it, we often talk about the need for an incident response plan. We often talk about, what's the relationship between the incident response plan and business continuity and disaster recovery, because we know they're not one and the same.
Right.
I think what we are seeing in both our client base as well as just in the overall, customer landscape is that, um, there are a lot of organizations out there that are truly in the SMB space, small and medium-sized businesses, right? Of which we would not call your employer one. Um, and their challenge is that in many cases, they don't even have someone in the organization that really understands IT.
Mhm.
They may, it's my cousin's brother, it's my nephew's friend. It's some kid from the Career and Technology Center. We had an instance in the beginning of the year, back in, February, March, when it's cold, where there's an organization where they literally had a college student, which is fine, responsible for managing their network, which is fine. And this individual had no clear understanding of um, admin privileges, user credentials, um, and this organization. Now, granted, we're talking about 100, I think it was 110, 115 employees. But still, we're talking about an organization that's got 25 to 35 million dollars a year in annual revenue, um, and no real understanding of what this person is doing other than, well, my email works and I don't think we have any security issues. So my point to all of that is that we still have this segmentation in the space where there are organizations out there that they don't even have the support for their own IT. And
Right.
we started to watch the, what we would call managed service providers, MSPs, now come across the fence to organizations like Reclamere, who positions itself as a managed security services provider, and say, hey, listen, we don't want the liability. We're happy managing hardware. We're happy to be their net admin. We're happy to do those kind of operational IT functions and responsibilities. But when it comes to going above and beyond and truly baking in information security, especially from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective, people are putting their hand up going, I don't want to do that. Not only do they not want to do it, Michael, they don't know how to do it.
Right.
They don't have the resources, you
Yeah.
know? We had an incident not too long ago where we had a client came to us, and it was all about they want to build an incident response plan. And we're like, okay, well, it's a great conversation to have. It's worthwhile. And we said, well, do you have anything that you have worked with from the past? I don't even care if it's on the back of a bar napkin, right? Like, do you have something?
Yeah.
And they sent over to me an incident response plan that they had downloaded from the internet, and they had not even changed the name of the organization that they downloaded it from.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, what? And Michael, we're talking about, I think this was a wealth management firm that had 75 employees in it. And so my point is, like, there's a lot of stuff in the environment that people aren't really thinking about.
Right.
I mean, I realize that, your role is one of information security in a large organization, but I'm wondering from the amount of, because I know that you're a pretty prolific reader, and the work that you do, are you seeing or reading about things similar to that where you kind of sit back and scratch your head and go, oh my gosh, is this really still happening in 2024? Whether it's, lack of planning or lack of resources or just the overall misunderstanding of what it means to have a security incident compared to a data breach. Are you seeing instances like that as well?
Yeah. Here's the thing. We all lean to our strengths, right? And we sort of, we avoid the far end, right? Sometimes we're not good. We're not IT people, right? Or we're running a business. We're trying to keep the lights on, the doors open, stuff like that. And that is job one. I get that. Having said that, I'll pose this question. Let me put a statement out first. First, I think you can look at this world, operating this world, much like running a football team, right? What do they say is the secret sauce for success in football? All three phases: offense, defense, and special teams. You can't just look at one or two of those. If you're not looking at all three, you're not going to make it to the championship, right? So when I talk about those, when I think about those internal to us, here's something I think about, right? Let me ask you a question. You've got, as a business owner, small, medium business, you've got market forces, right? Pressures on you, right?
Sure.
You've also got Mother Nature, right? Large scale issues that can affect your business, your vendors, all things like that, right? And then you've got cyber risk, right? Those, I kind of see that as the holy grail, the three things you need to be looking at, because any one of those things can shutter your business if you're not looking at all three of those at the same time. One of the things I've challenged our teams to do, for example, I go to talk to the facilities folks, right? You think, well, what's facilities got to do with cyber? Well, our facilities folks are leaning now, they've modernized systems, and now these things are monitoring, chilled water and temperature and environmental things across all of our campuses. And I
Right.
said, were you doing that 5 years ago? No, this is great. We have one central place. We can monitor all the operations across all our facilities. So what happens if the network goes away? And that network could go away because of either A, cyber related activity, or B, just equipment failure.
Hmm.
And they said, well, if the network went away, we would have to dispatch technicians out to all of our different locations to be actively monitoring our stuff. I said, where's your game plan? Where's your incident response plan there, right? Because they don't think of incident response like we do, but they still need to have something in their hip pocket, because we all know one simple fact: these events never or rarely ever occur at a good time, right?
Hmm.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the weekend shift. You've got somebody who's not as experienced. What do they
Sure.
do? And
Yeah.
so that's getting back to the ground game. That's getting back to the fundamentals. Do we do an annual assessment of, like we do internal, which says, what are our significant risks to this organization? 5 years ago, we talked about, 3 Mile Island, which is just a couple miles up the road from downtown Harrisburg, and it was fully operational. That
Hmm.
was shut down. Right now, in the last 6 months, Microsoft is restarting that thing. That's an environmental risk that we need to be thinking about. It's ever changing. And if we weren't having at least annual cadence of conversations about what the various risks are, then I like on the, like, muscles that you don't use, they're atrophying, right? Fighting against that atrophy is so important to an organization's program. Yet it's the one thing that we don't really think about, because, well, when would have we had to open up that document that talks about how do we recover XYZ system, right?
Right.
So it's about, again, ground game, foundational, doing the good practices of just maintaining your conversation amongst your critical people within the organization. And where you don't have, subject matter expertise in an area, that's when you want to reach out to somebody like Reclamere and say, hey, could you at least look at what we're doing here? Let's do a one-time consultant, whatever. Give us
Sure.
a grade our current program, help us identify where the gaps are. So at least now we can start thinking about how to start resourcing those things to get them from, nothing up to at least something of respect, right? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So I
No,
think that's a lot of place to look at. Understand your ground game, make sure you're touching the fundamentals, and seek help where it's going to best benefit you.
no, I think those are all really good points, Michael. I think the other thing that I wonder about, um, as we get ready to wrap up 24, um, obviously everybody's has been talking about for the last year now, probably longer, artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of buzzwords out there, right? Everybody now has artificial intelligence baked into everything that they do, and that's going to solve all your problems. And the basic thing that I come back to is trying to get organizations to understand the real value
Mhm.
in doing one of two things or both, right? One of which is being able to get a snapshot in time of what does your cyber posture look like.
Hmm.
And there are what a lot of people don't seem to understand is that cyber insurance companies are using any number of tools to figure out what does your overall cyber risk posture look like. Now, whether or not that data is absolutely clean or not, that's a different conversation. But being able to do that and getting that, that cyber posture snapshot, right?
Mhm.
The other thing is, which is a lot, obviously, and from your experience, a lot more in-depth, time-consuming, and quite frankly, more costly, and that is an enterprise-wide security risk analysis and being able to really decide. In our particular case, we base everything on the NIST cybersecurity framework, but really being able to decide, okay, people, processes, and technology, and not just check boxes, but real live interviews with people to understand what is the operational risk, being able to risk rank things, being able to explain very clearly that the reason why we have multi-factor authentication in the environment, the reason why we have password management, et cetera, and so forth. But I think that the place where people really have to invest in is then, what does that remediation roadmap look like? And I will tell you that in the last 6 months for us, what I think going into 25 is going to be an area that people are going to have to pay attention to, and that is third-party vendor risk management.
I'm glad you touched on that. That's where I was going to go with this conversation, because I think you're absolutely right. AI is gonna potentially give us capabilities unlike we have had prior, and that's a great thing. The caveat is, it's like so many security tools out there, garbage in, garbage out. If you
Right.
don't put the right details in, if you're not validating that, then you can't expect to get great results out of it. So the upside is the potential's there. The downside is, like every other security tool, you have to be managing that space. So that's the one thing. The other thing, to your point about third-party management, that's the other thing. It's like there's two risks there. The one that, in fact, we have just basically dedicated a core team of folks looking exclusively at third-party risk, because we recognize that that's like in the top 3 category of where
Mhm.
our highest risks are coming from. There's the insider risk, which is, of course, somebody clicks on an email link or whatever it is. But then third party is almost neck and neck with that. We've got hundreds of vendors, and so we're using third party, ironically, third party resources to manage our third parties. The problem, the real thing, I've always said, is we have we're pretty good at managing our environment. But two of the challenges we've always had is integrations. When we're integrating, bringing it to hospitals on, we're talking about, hundreds of devices, applications, all these things. And how do you get in there in advance, get internal, effective knowledge, and start building your strategy around fully integrating those things? It's like having you marry the family, but the uncle shows up at the
Yeah.
holiday party, and what do we do about Uncle Joe? Whatever it is. I'm sorry, not Joe, but
That's okay. I've been
so
called worse.
so what do you do about Uncle Joe? And so that's the one thing. The other thing that's also a sort of a black box threat in my mind is this: you may be dealing with a handful of third parties as part of your corporate, extended corporate family, if you will, but are they telling you about how they're integrating AI into their architecture? This is where it's like I consider this like, coming in through the side door, not the front door, right? And so you're protecting the house, right? And you're looking like, the front door locked, the back door locked, the windows are locked, everything like that. But maybe the chimney, have we thought about the chimney? Maybe that's how these, the point is, AI is creeping in all over the place. And if you're dealing with third parties, you want to know what their security program looks like specific to the AI capabilities that they're now rolling in. And the one common thread through everything I've read, heard, seen about AI is it's got great potential, but it's not quite here yet. And unfortunately, the only way you're going to establish that AI is really rock solid takes time.
You have to teach it.
And
You have to learn. Right.
it has to teach and learn, but you also remember, the learning is about failing, right? We go to
Mhm.
school, and the most valuable thing you're going to learn comes from your failures, not your successes. And
Yeah.
so we're early in that adoption cycle, and everybody's hot on this technology, and I completely understand why. But in my mind, it's still untested.
Yeah.
And in the healthcare sector, you think we're not having conversations about that because you don't want bad decisions, bad outcomes. And
Sure.
while everybody is hot on, oh, this is the new bright shiny object, wonderful, think about, and it has amazing potential for what it's going
Mhm.
to do for healthcare. Having said that, we recognize one fundamental, what we call the man in the loop, right? You don't have an AI come back with a recommendation without having somebody of solid experience and knowledge in that area of expertise, analyzing the results and
Right.
validating based on personal professional experience whether that's a good course of action or not. So I
Mhm.
would encourage that with everybody in looking at or leveraging AI technologies. Who is your man or person in the loop who's going to validate that until you get to a point of comfort where you know 99.99% of the time we don't have to worry about this.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't say it's funny, um, but I've gotten emails and letters, old-fashioned letters, believe it or not, that when I talk to folks, uh, know that they were generated using ChatGPT or some
Oh,
other
yeah.
platform that people literally did not take the
Yeah.
time to read and edit.
Mhm.
Um, and when you start talking about, I don't want to say the laziness, but the desire for convenience and speed,
Yeah.
in many cases we leverage third party vendors because they have the resources, the expertise, et cetera, that either we lack or just quite frankly, because from a project perspective, we don't have those resources. So we depend on them. So we trust them, right? We
Mhm.
put a lot of trust in folks. And we had an incident not too long ago, not we Reclamere, but in working with a client where so client A works with vendor one, and vendor one reports back to the client, oh, by the way, our vendor had a security incident. So now we start talking about the downboarding of risk to not only your third party vendor, but what
Mhm.
about their vendors
Yeah.
and their vendors? It's like, I'll date myself and I can't remember the name of this shampoo commercial, but this person told one person and then they told another two people. And I know I'm weird when I talk about these things. I think it's like Clairol or something. I don't know. Go out on YouTube, you can find it, I'm talking about. But my point is that that's a real live issue. That's a
Mhm.
real live challenge. Obviously, your organization depends on, in this particular case, your organization depends on Reclamere to manage its IT assets. Well, Reclamere has vendors that it depends on to do things for us. And so that what my point is that third party vendor risk management not only is going to be a challenge, I think, but it's going to become even more complicated. um, and the other thing I find often is people don't even have any kind of policy, procedure, or practice around, okay, let's say that I want to come work for you
Mhm.
as a vendor. What's the due diligence process that I have to go through? How do you onboard me?
Mhm.
Then, how do you manage the life of our relationship together? Because my cyber posture may change over the time that we're together. And then, oh, by the way, either because the contract ends, you decide you don't want to be in the dance with me anymore. I decide I don't want to be in the dance with you anymore. What does the offboarding process look like?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, you make it too complicated. What happens when I am the individual, the organization that is storing, transacting, managing data on your behalf, and it's in my environment, and now I'm being offboarded? How do I prove to you that your data that I'm holding has in fact been fully extracted from the environment?
Right.
And nobody's having that conversation, Michael.
Well, and it all starts with the beginning of the relationship, right? It's, we have business associate agreements, BAAs, with hundreds of companies, and it's written into those contracts, right? Up front says our expectation of you is any sort of incident you're reporting to us, right? You have an obligation. You have an obligation to maintain security controls and your security posture and all these things. So it starts with setting the expectation up front, because we all know how this comes down, right? XYZ third party vendor has an event. If it's not in ink someplace, then you've kind of lost your foothold into getting some sort of,
Oh yeah.
you know, a, resolution to this issue, right?
Mhm.
So first is make sure it's written into the contract, the terms, conditions up front. Here's the expectation that you guys are going to maintain your environment and let us know if something bad happens, Okay, so that's the first thing that I would say there. Um, Ongoing, it's just like, it's, again, third party vendors. We have, we basically license third party assessments of those so we can track their rating. It's I think we use Black Kite or something like that, that gives
Mhm.
us ongoing updates as far as all of our vendors are concerned, like that. And so, we challenge people. We're a high trust organization, and if you're familiar with high trust, well, I'll tell you, it can be, it's a comprehensive framework. It's a high bar for a lot of organizations to meet, but we really truly believe in it. And it's a standard by which we move forward. We encourage all of our third party folks to get high trust certified. Now, there's different levels of high trust certification. We recognize for smaller organizations they don't need to go full tilt on this whole thing, but at least doing the baseline, you can go through that process. Then you can go out to all of your vendors or all your partners, and say, hey, we take the extra step and measure to reach this bar, this level that's industry recognized. That should
Mhm.
be a selling point for your marketing team, by the way, right? Because if you're going out there and try and build confidence with your partners, then that's absolutely a feather in your cap that you should be putting out there. It's like, not only can you believe us and trust in our services, but hey, by the way, we got your interests, in mind as well, as we evolve this partnership.
So, in wrapping up 24, at least from Reclamere's perspective, we had a really great year. We're very appreciative of all the folks that we work with. Um, we've grown staff, grown the business. We forecast to have a really strong 25 as well. Obviously, there's, everybody has their own crystal ball and what they think is going to happen. I guess, for people that are in information security today, such as yourself, is there a single piece of advice or something that you would share with them, to kind of get them geared up to really think about 2025? What should they be focusing on?
So we have a lot of conversations about AI right now because, again, it's a hot topic, and looking at from a security compliance, like I kind of am spearheading all of our HIPAA assessments, PCI, all that sort of stuff. And the thing I keep coming back to is this, encouraging us to think about as an organization, is this: AI is ubiquitous now. It's everywhere. The second you start showing up, starts showing up on NBC broadcasts in the form of an Apple ad for the new AI built into your cell phone. That should be giving you pause for thought, right? Because these technologies are now ever present in everything. And so
Hmm.
one of the things, a challenge I bring back to our teams is, how are we making sure that people are using these tools responsibly? I mean, there's some tools, IT services and tools, that you gotta train on, like Microsoft Teams and stuff. It's not something that we use outside of the business, right? We don't use it for personal calendars and personal emails, stuff like that, hopefully. But AI, it's going to be ubiquitous, and whether you're using it for private stuff or we're using it for professional stuff, we need to draw that line, make it evidently clear that, make sure you understand where your data is being used, right? There's appropriate uses for it inside the company and outside the company. Don't conflate the two. Because from a compliance perspective, worst case is somebody starts dumping patient data into a public facing Copilot instance or something. And all of a sudden, how are you going to get that back once Microsoft Copilot, starts slicing and dicing that and analyzing it, and perhaps even, God forbid, sharing it with the external world?
Sure.
That's one of my big concerns for 25, is how do we paint that to our folks to understand that not all technology is good. Technology is good when used appropriately. Let's
Hmm.
make sure we understand the difference. Getting back to what you were talking about just a few moments ago about the rise of AI in terms of cyber threat. One of my favorite presentations to give, and I give it a lot to high schoolers and college kids and stuff, is about OSINT, open source intelligence, right?
Hmm.
And there's a whole field out there. If you're not familiar with it, please just go do some basic reading to understand what's going on. But basically, it's this massive repositories of a lot of it's public source information and knowledge about us. when you start doing even a baseline look into OSINT and understand what information, I mean, I did an OSINT search on myself one time. I was like, they have every office number, every place I've ever lived, every email I've ever used in a database out there. I mean, stuff I forgot about 20 years ago is still there.
Right.
Imagine now when AI goes through and can take all this open source knowledge about us, putting it all together, creating a complete mapping of our history, and start crafting custom emails targeted at getting me. Hey, I'm your buddy. Remember me? We worked together 17 years ago at the location. You've never seen scripted phish attacks like this. We are on the cusp of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the unholy trinities in my mind is OSINT and AI coming together to find novel ways of convincing us of the authenticity of that message that just came through the inbox.
Yeah. So 3 things. Number 1, thank you. Not only for your time, but obviously the conversations we have and your friendship.
Yes.
Number 2, I hope that you and your family have a super awesome, great, happy New Year.
Yeah.
And then obviously number 3, the next time I'm in Harrisburg, we got to get together in person because I'm not really fond of flat panels. I'm old fashioned and would much rather hang out in person. So
I have really enjoyed our conversations that we've had over the years, Joe. You're an amazing person. You've done some great things, and we're common minds. We both have this spirit about what's coming down the road and how can we help each other deal with whatever eventualities coming at us. And I've always appreciated your support, your staff support. You guys have always partnered with us, been amazing partners in helping us protect our systems and our data sets and stuff like that. You've always been over backwards for us. Again, really appreciate everything that Reclamere has always done for us.
Well, I appreciate you, Michael. I'm going to wrap it up and then we can continue to chat.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.